everyone. Welcome to our March Books edition of Librarian Book Chat. And as always, I'm here with, I'm Annie Phillips. I'm here with Amanda Campbell, who is the manager of the Monrovia branch, and Lady Smith, who is the proprietor of our wonderful Snail on the Wall independent bookstore. And we are here. We all have some wonderful books that are coming out in March that we wanted to share with you because we're just excited about them and want you to be excited too if you're looking for some good reads. So I am going to pull up my, excuse me, I'm shifting back and forth here. Let me, I am totally clicking around. Excuse me. Let's see. I gotta share my screen. Oh my God.
Technology.
You'd think at this point I would remember, but anyway, bless my heart. Okay. Our new releases. So I'm going to get started with some of the things that that caught my eye. And as always, there's so many others that I'm like, oh, I could have added that one too, but these are just a few. These are all, and these, the ones I'm mentioning, are actually coming out a bit later in March. It just worked out that way, but they all caught my eye. The first one is called Red Island House, and it's by Andrea Lee. One of the reasons it caught my eye, of course, beautiful cover there. It's set in Madagascar. My husband was in the Peace Corps a long time ago, and Madagascar was his posting, and so he had a really unique experience. And so Red Island House is about, she's an American. Her name is Shay. And, but she and her husband Senna live in Madagascar, which if you didn't know is like an island off the coast of Africa. It's an island country. And her husband wants to build her dream house there. And it casts a spell on her from the moment she sees it. It's, one of those kind of mesmerizing places of the heart, I guess. And she's sort of, bemusedly the mistress of the household. And she's sort of, as you are, if you're in a different country, kind of the way, like her American sensibilities, and then being in this completely different country, which just from, things my husband's told me, it's just really just vastly different. And of course, not a surprise and very interesting. So, and she's also feeling that connection to this being the continent of her ancestors. And she is kind of just an observer at first, watching, what's going on around her and the people of her new village, her new town. But as they become more, she and her husband, they have kids, they become a part of the island. She finds herself enmeshed in some of these different histories and rivalries. And as it mentions, part of the colonial legacy that's tied to that as well. And then she has to make a life-altering decision. We don't know what that is, but it just sounds fascinating, and I'm excited about that. The next book is called Red Widow. It's by Alma Katsu, and she is, I've read another book by her. She had a book come out a few years ago. I always do this on camera. I blank out. The Hunger. Thank you. The Hunger. And that was sort of a kind of a strange horror story based on the Donner Party, the one that sets out and we know what happens. And she kind of put her own twist on it. It was very good. She's a great writer. It was, also horrifying in its own way. So when I saw this, this is actually completely different. It's a spy intelligence thriller. In her background, she spent like 30 years as an intelligence analyst, and she still does contract work on the side. So she knows her stuff. Red Widow, as you can guess, Russia is involved. And it's about two women CIA agents who have kind of come together. Their paths have intertwined with a threat to the Russia division that they work in. One of the main characters had thought her career with the CIA was over after, it sounds like some boundaries got crossed with another agent, and she was sort of sidelined. But she's been pulled back into the special internal investigation because she's known as the human lie detector, which sounds really cool. So, but 3 of their Russian assets have been discovered, and they think there's a mole, like a counter spy. So they have to kind of figure that out. So she's back at the agency. Also, she is crossing paths with another CIA agent known as the Red Widow, who is the wife of a former director killed in the field under mysterious circumstances. So anyway, lots of intrigue. It sounds, and again, knowing her writing, I think this will be a really wonderful, excellent story and kind of a new twist, as it should be on the spy thriller. So looking forward to that. Those 2 that I mentioned come out March 23rd. The next 2 come out March 30th. The final revival of Opal and Nev by Donny Walton really caught my eye. It's one of those, I think it's kind of like Daisy Jones and the Six that came out a couple of years ago, where there's the sort of documentary feel. It's a music duo, Opal and Neville. And so it starts out in the 1970s, and Opal is from Detroit. She's African American, but she's, she doesn't want to just settle into a 9-to-5 job. She wants to follow her dreams. She's got a Afro punk kind of her, feel and look and everything, and she wants to follow that. And an aspiring British singer-songwriter named Neville Charles discovers her, and they become partners, rock music partners. And so when they're getting started, they get signed to a label, and a rival band, they're doing like a sort of a promotional concert. A rival band shows a Confederate flag at the opening concert, and Opal's, her fighting against that, I think, sort of, changes the trajectory of things. And then anyway, decades later, fast forward to 2016, and they're sort of looking at, a reunion. There's a journalist researching them, and it just sounds very, very interesting. And again, I love that sort of true historic feel, kind of an imagined scenario. So it sounds great. I'm excited about it. The final book is Liberty by Kayleen Greenage, and her first book came out a couple of years ago. It was called We Love You, Charlie Freeman. This one also sounds amazing and kind of based on history. Liberty is a free Black girl in Reconstruction era Brooklyn. And her mother is actually a physician. And the idea is that Liberty would join her mother as one of the first, Black female doctors. But Liberty is more interested in music, and she wants to kind of forge her own path. Also, unlike her mother, she can't pass as far as, skin tone. And so she realizes that's also, unfortunately, more hurdles at that time. So she is proposed to by a young man from Haiti. And he's saying, hey, yeah, come with me and you'll be able to do what you want. But she finds even in Haiti that, she runs up against obstacles being a woman. And this is inspired by the life of one of the first Black female doctors in the U.S. And it said it's perfect for readers of Britt Bennett and Yaw Jesse. So I'm excited about this one. And again, beautiful cover. So those are my books, and I will pass it on to Amanda.
All right, thank you. Okay, so I have some more nonfiction picks for you guys. The first one is called But You're Still So Young, How 30-Somethings Are Redefining Adulthood by Kayleen Shaffer. And I was able to read an advanced copy of this one, and I loved it. It's structured around 5 milestones that sociologists in the 50s thought that you needed to reach to be a real adult. And these are finishing school, leaving home, marriage, gaining financial independence, and having kids. And there's a little bit in this book about why we're not reaching those milestones in our early 20s anymore, if ever. But really the heart of this book is hearing the stories from others in their 30s and in each of these areas. And they're at different points in their life, have different expectations of where they maybe should have been. And they're all grappling with, do they even want these things anymore? How do you balance your expectations versus the reality of what's happening? And as a person, as a 30-something without a spouse or kids, this book was talking directly to me. But really, I would recommend it to anyone who tends to scroll through your social media and feel somehow behind other people. I really loved hearing just that honest conversation of where people are versus that expectation. That comes out March 2nd. The next one is called The Barbizon, The Hotel That Set Women Free by Paulina Bren. This one also comes out March 2nd. And The Barbizon is the legendary New York hotel for women. So after World War I, women started going to New York for work, and they didn't really want to stay in boarding houses. They wanted what the men already had: exclusive residential hotels with maid service, cultural programs, workout rooms, and private dining. So the Barbizon was built in 1927 and catered to the modern woman who was seeking a career in the arts. And this book has the history of that hotel and a lot of the famous ladies who stayed there, including Sylvia Plath and Grace Kelly, Liza Minnelli, Felicia Rashad, Sybil Shepherd, Joan Didion, and Meg Wolitzer, and many more. So this book is bound to have some really interesting stories, especially about Sylvia Plath. I heard that the second half is mainly about her.
Wow.
So the next book is called The Babysitter, My Summers with a Serial Killer by Liza Rodman and Jennifer Jordan. This also comes out March 2nd. So this is one of those part memoir, part true crime stories, and it's about Liza Rodman's childhood. She had a very charismatic babysitter who turned out to also be a serial killer. So it takes place in Cape Cod in the 1960s. And actually this babysitter was like the one adult that she really felt safe with. So she, along with her co-writer, are grappling with those feelings of how she only felt safe with this man. And later on finding out that he was a serial killer and took her to some of the places where his victims were buried. Yikes. So bound to be some really intense feelings in there and a really interesting story. All right, the next one is The Soul of a Woman by Isabel Allende, also releasing on March 2nd. And you may recognize Isabel Allende from the fiction world. She is the best-selling author of A Long Petal of the Sea, The Japanese Lover, House of the Spirits, and so many other amazing books. She's written some nonfiction already, but this one is mainly about her opinions on feminism and what it means to be a woman. She shares how her life was shaped living in Chile, which is a very patriarchal society. But she was raised by her strong single mother. She also talks about her passionate opinions on equality, aging, relationships, and love. So this is bound to be another great book by Isabel Allende. All right, the last one is The Code Breaker, Jennifer Doudna, Gene Editing and the Future of the Human Race by Walter Isaacson. Now, Walter Isaacson is a master of biography. He wrote some great books, including one on Leonardo da Vinci and Steve Jobs. This one is all about gene editing. So Jennifer Doudna read and loved The Double Helix by James Watson when she was just in 6th grade, and ever since then was just fascinated with finding out how the world works. And she and her collaborators turned that curiosity about nature into an invention known as CRISPR. It is an easy-to-use tool that can edit DNA. So, of course, that opens up some really amazing medical opportunities, but also some really interesting, sticky moral questions. And after she helped to discover CRISPR, Doudna became a leader in wrestling with those moral issues. So this book will talk about all about DNA editing, the moral questions. You get a little bit of everything. I'm really excited to read this one. All right, those are my nonfiction picks for March.
Thank you, Amanda. This is a really cool, just range of subjects as usual. And gosh, that babysitter one sounds chilling, unreal. And of course, the Walter Isaacson, he always takes on these really fascinating topics. So good, lots of good stuff. Thank you. Okay, so we are going to move on to Lady, and she's got some awesome things and some things to tell us. So thank you.
Okay, thanks, Annie. I am excited about March books, and I have 5 novels here this time. And I'm going to start with one that I've read. Who is Maude Dixon? It is a suspense sort of thriller, and I'm going to call it delicious. Like, it is just, so you just dive in and then you reemerge maybe the next day when you finish it, or that night, or whatever. It's one of those. But Maude Dixon is the pen name of a writer that wants to remain anonymous, but she's an extremely popular novelist. So, there are references maybe to Elena Ferrante that wrote the Neapolitan series, and a little bit of that is at play. But a young assistant who has worked in the publishing world goes to work for her and is led into the secret of who she is and lives in her house. And then in the midst of doing research for the next novel, they go on a trip to Morocco. But things take some twists and turns in Morocco, and Maude and the author behind her, I mean, they're not who they seem. So it is just every page has a new twist in every chapter. So it is, I can't really say more than that because I can't give it away, but you're going to want to read it. And that's Alexander Andrews. So the next one is historical fiction that takes us to, this is The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner. This takes us to Victorian England and an apothecary shop where there was a secret, underground, tucked away shop in London that had the facade of being an apothecary, but the woman who ran it was actually dispensing poisons that would help. Her clientele was made up of women who needed to solve problems, maybe get rid of some of the men in their lives. So she would dispense poisons to them, but it becomes about their stories. And a 12-year-old comes to her with a request for a poison for her mistress's husband. And that leads to a series of events that then in the modern day, there's also, it kind of is one of those books where the chapters go back and forth. So there is a modern day character that goes to London and starts to uncover some of these mysteries and murders. So it's great. I'm actually listening to it, and the accent of the 18th century chapters, the actor who reads that is amazing. So if you're into audiobooks, I recommend it as a listen too. Okay, now we go to Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. Sorry, I mean, that's a difficult thing to say, but I mean, I hope you've heard Kazuo Ishiguro's name. He has won the Nobel Prize in Literature. He has written Remains of the Day and Never Let Me Go. So many of us have read and absolutely loved those books. So this is a much anticipated new release from him. And this one is about an artificial intelligence. Clara is an artificial friend who is in a store and wants to be purchased by someone to go home with them. But she observes the people who come by, and she's looking for emotional connection, and she's observing how people behave and relate to one another. So the great thing about Ishiguro is that he manages to talk. He does sometimes deal with science fiction a little bit, like in Never Let Me Go, but he's always about the human relationships and the emotion behind it, like in Remains of the Day. So this is another one that sort of combines those two together, and I can't wait to read it. Then I'll move to The Lost Village, which is another suspense novel by first-time novelist Camilla Sten. And it is, it's being compared to the Blair Witch Project because it is about a group of documentary filmmakers who go, and they're located in Sweden. And so they go to this lost village to try to figure out what happened to the hundreds of people that used to live there. And then one day, mysteriously were gone. And so while they're there, and it's just a small group of them, while they're there exploring, so they keep hearing voices, their equipment goes missing, they feel like they're seeing shadows and hearing things. And so it's one of those where you want to know what happened to the Lost Village, and you're trying to figure out what's going to happen to these people. So it's not super scary. It's just kind of a mild sort of suspense. Now I'm in the middle of it. It may get very scary, but so far I'm enjoying kind of being in Sweden in a completely different place and kind of learning about this mining village from long ago. So I recommend that one. And then I'll finish with Of Women and Salt by Gabriella Garcia. And this one is, it starts out in Miami with a character named Jeanette who's dealing with addiction. And she wants to know more about her history and sort of how why she has this problem and how she got here. And it's very much about how she relates to her mother, who is a Cuban immigrant. So Jeanette leaves Miami and goes to Cuba to talk with her grandmother and spend time there and uncover sort of their family history, which also uncovers a lot of history about the country and the culture. So, but it's also about women's relationships, our relationships, with our mothers and daughters. And so it's got a lot of layers. And I think people are going to love that one. So those are my 5 picks and looking forward to sharing them.
Thank you so much. And as always, you can, if you are interested in checking these out, we have these on order. If you want to buy them, you can go to Snail on the Wall, and Lady will get you taken care of. And we're listing the titles, both Lady on her website, and we're putting it on our Goodreads page. So if you want to review all the titles we've talked about, there's plenty of places to find them. And I know that we'll talk about this again next month, but there is an exciting event that'll be coming up with our foundation. And it's John Archibald, right?
Yeah, so that's another March book that is coming out, March, I'm not sure, maybe March 9th, but it's called Shaking the Gates of Hell. And the subtitle is A Search for Family and Truth in the Wake of the Civil Rights Revolution. And John Archibald, you've seen his byline and so many stories for AL.com. And so he is the son of a Methodist minister, and he writes about how his dad came up in the civil rights era and how there were conflicts and, what he did as a minister and just how that plays out. So it is nonfiction, and we're excited to be hosting. The Snail and the Huntsville Library Foundation are going to co-host an event on April 8th. So the tickets will be publicized soon, and we hope that you'll join us. It is online. We're still online these days, but it's a virtual event, which means we can reach a lot more people. So we hope everyone will join us for that. We think it'll be so interesting to hear directly from him.
Thank you so much. That's I love his articles, and so I'm excited to read this and excited about the event. All right. Well, finally, we get to our our librarian book club pick for March. And I love how this always happens. We always, Lady and I, we always end up agreeing on just separately. It's kind of the great minds thing. Clara and the Sun. And I'm very excited about this. And so we're going to encourage everyone to read this. It's coming out March 2nd. And we're going to explore the uncanny valley of AI. And I always find stories like these to be really touching in a way, because you've got these, the AI and I think mostly of, I love Star Trek: The Next Generation and the character of Data. And he just tries so hard to make that emotion even more than humans. And so this just really appeals to me, and I'm excited to read it, as I know a lot of people are. So we'll see how that turns out. It looks like it'll be a beautiful story. So yes, yay for thinking of great books and great minds thinking alike. So well, thank you both for joining me, and always for your insight and curatorial prowess and everything else. Delightful conversation. So I know I am already thinking about what's coming out in April, and boy, as we hit spring and summer, it's going to be a bumper crop. So get ready. So look for us in April. And I thank you both and appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thanks, Annie.
Thank you.